Hey everybody, this is Ricardo with Gathering Magic, and today I'm going to be going over the mythic cards that have been spoiled from Battle for Zendikar. We're going to rank them from 15th to 1st, and we got a lot of cards to go over, so let's go ahead and get started.
Now before we get started, I just wanted to state that these are my opinions, and they could very easily differ from yours. I'd like to hear any opinions, as I think all of these cards are great in their own respects, but if we're being honest, some have to be better than others, right? That being said, they wouldn't be mythics if they were bad. At 15th, we have Dragon Master Outcast. I love this little guy, but he's got no evasion. On top of that, he's a 1/1, but after all, we are paying just 1 red mana, and the upside is almost worth it. He could pump out a bunch of 5/5 dragons if left unanswered, but it's unlikely that he's not going to draw a bunch of attention. Also, he's a reprint, and he saw 0 play the first time around, and he's almost completely unplayable in Modern. He's a sweet threat though in EDH. At 14th, it was close, but I had to give this spot to Green Warden of Marasa. This card's pretty wonky. It's double Eternal Witness with a little more beefiness. When Green Warden of Marasa enters the battlefield, you get to regrowth, and when he dies, you get to regrowth again, if you exile him. A 5/4 for 6 mana isn't too impressive, and I'd be utterly shocked if he saw it done a play. But I could see him in some insane See the Unwritten deck. At 13th, we have Quarantine Field. Quarantine Field has its uses in some decks. It might see play in white-blue control, like in the sideboard. So here's the problem I have with this card. It's really expensive to blanket a few threats. Sure, sometimes your opponent can't answer this and it's just effectively exiled a few things for the rest of the game, but couldn't we have permanently done that with Ugin? On top of that, I feel like Abzant is going to be the go-to deck when Battle for Zendikar comes out, and they have Dramoka's Command. At 12th, we have Void Winnower. I just can't even. Look at this thing. It's so odd. Here we have an 11/9 Eldrazi that says, your opponent can't cast even-costed spells or block with even-costed creatures. So it does have some uses. You can stop your opponent from blocking with tokens and casting more Siege Rhinos, but the cost is what's really holding it back. 9 mana isn't the easiest to ramp to, but again, there could be some insane See the Unwritten deck. At 11th, we have Akoum Firebird. I think this card's pretty well rounded. Previous experiences with Mythic Phoenixes have been really hit or miss, and I really like this one. I just wish that the cost on recurring it was a little bit lower. The hasty aggro decks this wants to be in would never want to see a 6th or even 7th land drop. That being said, a 4 mana 3/3 Flying Haster is pretty great. You can play it on your second main phase after all if you need a blocker, but in red we're all fists. At 10th, we have Part the Water Veil. I think this card's actually pretty good. I read it a little differently when I saw that it had Awaken. It's a 6/6 creature that you take an extra turn with, or a 6 mana Time Ward that goes to the exile instead of the graveyard. That's not too bad. In Standard, Tasigur is one of the only relevant cards that can bring stuff back from the graveyard, and I can't imagine our opponent giving us an extra turn. I could see this card being played in Banned or Sultai control. I mean, heck, even white-blue control could use this as a one-of. At 9th, we have Sire of Stagnation. This thing is somewhat of a wonder. I'm surprised that we get something like this for control, and it attacks at a different angle with its triggered ability. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, exile the top 2 cards of his or her library and draw 2 cards. That's a very unique angle of attack, on top of the fact that it sits on a 5/7 body, which is quite tough to answer in combat. I'm unsure how this will do in Standard at 6 mana because your opponent might not care, but maybe in Sultai Ramp he could do some heavy lifting. If played in EDH, he'll draw a giant target on his back, as he will get a ton of advantage. At 8th, we have Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. Ulamog is a pretty heavy body for a pretty heavy cost, but he's incredibly effective and will stick to the board with his indestructibility. Ulamog has always been a heavy hitter, ever since his first form, but here he exiles 2 things when you cast him, and he exiles 20 cards from the defending player's library with each swing. Exiling is huge, and here it's in massive chunks. That being said, he costs 10 and only exiles things when he's cast, so you can't really cheat him into play. If we had Devotion, then this wouldn't be too big of an issue, but that's cycling out of Standard. In Modern, I could see this replacing Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, but that may be pushing it. Either way, I love this card and hope to be able to play it. At 7th, we have Omnath, Locus of Rage. Omnath is back and he's been having a bad day, and he's very mad about it. Omnath can summon 5/5 elementals when you play a land, and when an elemental dies on your end, he chucks a lightning bolt at target player or creature. This card screams flavor, and I absolutely love it. Can you imagine the value synergy with fetch lands? I mean, he does cost the same as a Tarka, and that might cause some issues with the deck builders. That being said, he's a 5/5 for 7 mana, and he synergizes well with some of the cards from the set, and I expect him to see play in the right deck. Speaking of one of the cards he synergizes well with, at 6th, we have Oblivion Sower. Man, I think this card's awesome. It's such a house at 6 mana, as it can ramp you up to more Eldrazi. I've actually been working on a sweet brew that ramps this guy out, but you'll get the details on that later. We have a 6 mana 5/8, which is way above average on body stats, and he says, when you cast Oblivion Sower, exile the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. You may put any lands exiled this way onto the battlefield under your control. This is extremely powerful. At 6 mana, the body is already impressive, but we also get to potentially ramp? That's amazing. If we can get even 1 land off of it, it's worth it. And this is off Castigum, so we'll always get that value unless we get stifled, which isn't a thing in Standard. I expect this card to be in a few decks for Standard, and maybe even Modern. Definitely EDH though, he's playable anywhere. At 5th, we have Undergrowth Champion. This card can push some damage pretty quickly. It's a 2/2 elemental for 1 and double green that says, if damage were to be dealt to Undergrowth Champion while it has a +1/+1 counter on it, prevent that damage, and remove a +1/+1 counter from Undergrowth Champion. He has a triggered ability as well. Landfall, put a +1/+1 counter on Undergrowth Champion. This guy is going to be in the red zone all day, every day. For the cost of only 1 +1/+1 counter, you can prevent any amount of damage. That's just 1 land drop. How hard is that? But on top of that, we also have the fetch lands from Khans of Tarkir. Each of them counts as a land drop when they enter, and when you sacrifice, you put another land into play, triggering landfall again. So, on the next land drop, he could be a 4/4 if he sandbagged a fetch land. He's going to be a pain for most decks to deal with in combat. At 4th, we have Ob Nixilis Reignited. Ob Nixilis is a Planeswalker again, and he's bringing the pain. I think this walker is going to fit right into Abzan the way Liliana Vest never could. Let's go ahead and go over his abilities. +1, draw a card, and you lose 1 life. Card draw for some life has been the norm for a while, but we've never really seen it at 1 card for 1 life increments. I expect this to be a huge factor to the card's success, as this is a great follow-up play for Siege Rhino. -3, destroy target creature. That's pretty straightforward, not a lot to go over. If your opponent has a threat without pro-black, well, it's going to meet its maker at the hands of Ob Nixilis. -8, target opponent gets an emblem with, whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. That's some strong inevitability. Every turn cycle, your opponent has lost at least 4 life. This will make quick work of your opponent, and if Ob Nixilis got to stick around to watch, he's going to fuel the fire. All in all, a well-designed and very straightforward Planeswalker. At 3rd, we have Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Yep, Drana made it this far in my rankings, and for very good reasons. She's a 2/3 vampire with flying and first strike. She has a triggered ability that says, whenever Drana, Liberator of Malakir deals combat damage to an opponent, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. This is such a sweet card. Remember, she has first strike, so each of your other dudes is bound to get a counter before they deal their damage. She can tussle quite well with most creatures on the ground that early in the game without any help either. Mardu aggro decks are going to love playing Drana, and I can't wait to see her rush into Standard. At 2nd, we have Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. Gideon comes up just short of number 1, but barely. I love his abilities this time around, so let's go ahead and take a peek. +1, until the end of turn, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar becomes a 5/5 human soldier creature with indestructible that's still a Planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. Standard Gideon. Gets made into a Planeswalker and says, nah bro, I like a round of fisticuffs. On top of his impressive 5/5 body, he's indestructible and can take damage. Enough said. 0. Put a 2/2 white knight ally creature token onto the battlefield. This is good even if you aren't playing allies, because a 2/2 body for free is great after a board wipe. You aren't losing loyalty on this ability, which really gives it an upswing. -4. You get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. So you're going to be rewarded by having an army, but this changes your free 2/2s into free 3/3s. Any creature you play afterwards will be more resilient long after Gideon gets dealt with. I mean, if he gets dealt with. And Gideon himself will be tougher when you have an emblem as well. I'm really excited for him, and I hope he gets to team up with his ally buddies. At 1st, we have none other than Kiora, Master of Depths. Yep, call me lame, call me whatever you want. Kiora is going to be a huge deal. She's very swingy and comes in with a whopping 4 counters, which is high for a 4-costed walker. Let's take a look at her abilities. +1, untap up to 1 target creature and up to 1 target land. This is going to be great for ramping. We have Honored Hierarch and Rattleclaw Mystic as our early mana dorks, and we can use this to get to our late game faster. -2. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put up to 1 creature card and or 1 land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into the graveyard. Yeah, this is bonkers for plenty of reasons. We have the Delve mechanic that synergizes well with what's placed in the graveyard, and we can put up to 2 cards into our hand. That's a heavy chunk of value. In Modern, we might just put something into our graveyard we can grab back with Snapcaster Mage. It's just fantastic every time you use it. -8. You get an emblem with, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature. Then, you put 3 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens onto the battlefield. So first, to clear something up, you get the emblem, then after you get the emblem, you get the octopuses. Octopi. Whatever. This will result in your opponent not having any big scary creatures left, hopefully. You also get 3 8/8s. That's a big chunk of power that your opponent cannot ignore. Now, as you are playing a blue deck, you can protect them with counter magic, if you need to, and get in for lethal. All in all, Kiora is the full package, and she easily hits #1 of our Mythics.
Alright everyone, well those are all the cards I'm going to spoil for you today. Now like I said, our opinions may differ a little bit, so if you have any comments, go ahead and throw them in the comments down below, and we can have a little bit of discussion about it. As always, thanks for watching here at Gathering Magic.